So the alternative approach that we use is called Raptor. Coda doesn't need any packs. It's all just done inside Coda. Raptor stands for Recursive Abstraction Tree-Oriented Retrieval. You build a tree of knowledge out of the documents and then use Coda AI to scan the tree to find out which bits of those documents are relevant. A second query kicks in saying only use that document to solve the problem. I'm building a knowledge base that's all about using Coda. So I should be able to ask it any question about the use of Coda. Here's a question about saying, make a Coda pack that has two parameters, name and company, and returns a schema. When I run this query with Coda, it comes up with nonsense. That's because it doesn't understand the particular documentation that needs to answer the question. With Raptor, I have uploaded into Coda a knowledge base that's 600 kilobytes of documentation. And I've analyzed it using prompts and reduced that down to a knowledge tree, which is an overview of all of that. That's 22 kilobytes. This will fit into the context for the first query. So the first query says, oh, you're trying to write a pack. Let me have a look in the tree and see which bits of the knowledge base are relevant. And then I pull out only the relevant piece. The corpus is the table that contains all of the documents, right? I have 10 documents that I've loaded in. Each document is in the form of a canvas column. If I look at the sync tables knowledge base, you'll see that it's essentially a Coda document that tells all about how to do sync tables.
And just to clarify, this could be any information I have on my copy data.
So this could be how to assemble our electric bikes before we ship them to our customer, or this could be how to put together a life assurance policy for a client given certain circumstances. So I don't do a huge amount of editing to this document. I just load it in. This has been taken from the Coda website and contains all the information about building sync tables. If the system decides that what I'm trying to do is to build a sync table, then it'll go to this part of the knowledge base and use this to try and solve the problem.
Understood.
Right. Now, if I go all the way up to the top, all of these documents are too big to fit in. So we have this recursive tree structure where we start at the very top. I get the AI to build me a description of the whole document just so I can tag the document and say what it is. Sometimes it can be in the format of Markdown. And then I run the analyzer, which is a prompt that says, build me a summary of the document in the form of a YAML, which is a tree structure. This is a breakdown of everything. It's a summary of everything that's in the document, but it's enough for the AI to be able to figure out, based on the question you've asked, this is the part that I'm interested in.
If the format is a doc or Markdown?
Markdown is actually a bit easier, but it understands both. It understands them both. Sometimes they can also be in YAML as well. The Raptor table has just one row in it, and it pulls together the whole knowledge tree. This is the entire knowledge tree.
From all of the pages.
From all of the documents. So here's the parameter summary. Here's the summary for the data types. Here's the summary for remote access via the fetcher function. It's enough for the AI in the first pass to figure out which of these documents I need to look at. And then the next level down, it pulls in the document and handles the query. So here's the query. First one is write some Python code that uses the API of Coda to add a new row to the customer's document in the orders table and set the product to this and set the quantity to that. So when I click this button, it does two levels of analysis. The first one is which topic am I looking at? And then the second one is when it actually pulls in the information from that document. And as you see, it has written the Python, and it has correctly identified that the URL we're looking for is this endpoint here with this piece of data. So it's saying you're going to need an API token and you're going to need a document ID. These are the headers you need. This is the data to be sent as part of the request. Send it as a post, check that the response is 202, and then, so this is correct. It has figured out the correct answer, and it has done it by going to this document, which is the API document. I can give it queries about just about anything to do with Coda, and it figures out how to answer them and then gives you the correct result.
And by setting it up like this, you're giving it the added benefit of displaying the topic column. I, as a business expert on the matter, can easily check and see, does that align with my expectation?
Yes. One of the most important things about agents is they have to be auditable. They have to be accurate, but they also have to leave an audit trail. And so this is your table that says, here's what I was asked to do, and here's the steps I took to answer it. So if it does go off and give somebody the wrong answer, you can go back and debug it. So here's one where I'm asking it to create a formula that will add a row to the orders table with the product set to whatever's in my order, the quantity set to the total of this list, and the amount set to the resulting quantity times the price. And so it goes off and says, what are you trying to do? It looks like you're building a CFL. So I'll go to the CFL document and I'll use that to help me answer it. And so it says, yes, the formula you want is add rows to the orders where the product is my order. The quantity is the sum of the items in the quantity list, and the amount is the sum multiplied by the price that's in the product, filtered by the product is equal to my order. So it's done a fairly complicated set of thinking by looking inside the documentation to find out, how do I write formulas to do this kind of thing? And it has produced an accurate and correct response. You won't be able to do that just by putting a query into Coda AI. It hasn't got enough information to do that. You have to put it through this Raptor process. And the final one is the one I tried before, where I said, write me a pack. It says you need the SDK because you're trying to create a pack, and then it goes and pulls in the SDK and uses that in order to deliver the result. The SDK is quite big, so this takes a little bit longer, but if we pull it up, we'll see that it has done the proper code to start a pack. It realizes that you need a schema. So it has said, this is a schema and these are the properties. So it has figured out how to build a schema within the pack. And then it says you're using an ordinary formula. So it's going to add formula. The name is hi, gives it a description. These are the parameters. These are the data types. And the return, the result type, is going to be based on the schema I just defined. And then I'm going to return inside the schema where the name is equal to this and the company is equal to that. This is the correct answer to the problem.
I have two questions on this. One is, and I'm sure you're getting to this, I would like to know what the AI prompt is. And the other question is, can I also include in the prompt something like, if you're not finding anything within the Raptor table that looks like a good match, do let me know that you're not equipped to answer this question.
In a full production environment, you would put in those guardrails, right? I haven't done that, but let's pull out the query. And it's looking at the prompt column.
Yeah.
And it's saying, using only the documentation below, respond with the code block format. We have to look at this. And what are you responding to? You go to the corpus, you're filtering where the ID is equal to the topic. Use that as the index into the corpus, and then give me the knowledge base, which is that huge document. So it pulls in that big document into the prompt. It looks like a little prompt, but it's not. This is all of this text, and that is the whole SDK document being pulled in. But you've already established that the SDK document is small enough to fit into the context window. If it wasn't, then the summarization process that we used to set all of this up would have failed. We would have got an error during the build to say, oh, that document is too big, in which case you have to split it up a bit smaller.
And from the look of it, when you look at the queries table, you press the blue button, it looks like it's one thing that it does, but it actually carries out two distinct actions.
Yeah, if we actually look at the on-click, it does two things. It says refresh the assistant, which is the topic first, which is this column, the result. So it is specifically doing it one after the other. And the topic is looking at your knowledge tree in order to figure out which of the items listed in the knowledge tree provide the information needed to solve the problem. And that then brings you back the definition of the topic. And then the next one says, use that definition of the topic to go and find the entire document, bring it in, and then use that to solve the problem. The purpose of an agent is to be asynchronous, autonomous, action-oriented, accurate, and auditable. As much as possible, we're trying to engineer a solution where it will take whatever information is coming in, put it through this Raptor process, and come up with an answer at the end. Without the user having to nudge it.
Would you recommend to your clients to turn these results into a separate audit log table?
Well, that's what the queries table here is. As part of our best practice, when you build an agent, each agent produces a row in a table to say, this is what I was asked to do. These are the steps I took, and here's the result, so that you're always building up an auditable table. Maybe at the end of the month, you'll archive that and reset it back to empty again. But it does mean that for most of my clients in regulated industries, they would never think of doing it any other way. But it does frighten me to see people using AI in an ad hoc way where something is sent off to a customer or an order is placed with a supplier. And then it turns out it went off and order, like that famous thing that ordered 900 chicken nuggets in McDonald's. And then they come back, well, how did it do that? And go, well, we don't know. We didn't keep any records. Well, you know, that won't fly in most regulated businesses. The whole idea of having a standard operating procedure is that you've documented all of that. But here's the magic of this, and why my clients have been so happy to use this, is that if we go back to the citizen developer, they already have these skills. They already know their business processes. They already are experts in spreadsheets and in the particular no code they're using. So the only thing we have to teach them is how to build agents and RAG agents at that. If they already have these skills, then we only want to use those skills in order to produce these agents that use RAG. Coda gives us a way to take the skills they already have, and using a little bit of prompt engineering and understanding how the context works, they're self-sufficient. They don't need to go to the IT department and say, can you help us build an agent that does this? Can you help us build a RAG database, a vector database with all our documents in it? For most business processes, the amount of information you need to bring in is actually quite small. Right now, the big AI companies are selling you on the idea that you can load up to 120 gigabytes of all your documents, all your policies, HR, hiring, firing, how we market, our image, our legal people, and put it all in there and then ask anything. We don't want to build agents that you can ask anything. We're building agents that only do one thing. My job is to take the customer specification and figure out what this complicated water pump we're going to build is going to look like, what components it needs, pull those from the product database into a bill of materials and hand that over to manufacturing to build. I need the procedure manual for configuring these systems. I need the data sheets for each of the components. I need the manufacturer's guide to how all of this gets pulled together. And that'll probably all fit nicely into the corpus database here. You're not having to build gigabytes. You are actually able to get by with megabytes.
Way you're trying to make AI less impressive, or at least seem less impressive?
Yeah. Just do the job.
I
don't want you to do research. I'm not saying you will be an expert in 16th century French philosophy, go off and solve world hunger. You're simply saying, no, you have access to these very mundane brass tacks, get the job done documentation, and you have a very specific task that you need to do. Now just get on with it and do it the same every single time, right? Whereas the highest level of AI agents will spend hours coming up with a strategy, executing the strategy, seeing what doesn't work and go back and re-execute that and so on, and design a whole new thing from scratch, which is fine if you're designing a new product or doing research into cancer. But if you're trying to run a standard operating procedure, the operative word is standard. We want the same procedure followed every time. Don't reinvent a new recipe. Use the standard ingredients and the standard process and come out with the solution. So these agents are more mundane. They are boring, yeah. But they're the ones that make the money.